All right, let's talk about three absolute giants in the world of business improvement: Lean, Six Sigma, and the theory of constraints. Now, for what feels like forever, they've been kind of pitted against each other, like rival sports teams. But what if that's all wrong? What if they're actually a super team?
But first, I've got a question for you, and I bet this one's going to hit close to home. Why do so many of those big, expensive, time-consuming improvement projects just fizzle out? You know the drill, right? There's a huge launch, tons of buzz, and then a few months later, crickets. Nothing has actually changed.
And here's the crazy part. It's not because people aren't trying. I mean, companies will go all in on lean, or they'll pour millions into Six Sigma certifications. The problem isn't the philosophy itself. It's the focus on just one of them. It's kind of like having a toolbox full of amazing tools, but you insist on using only the hammer for every single job. So this is how they're usually set up, right? You've got Lean, which is just obsessed with hunting down and eliminating waste. Then there's Six Sigma, all about crushing variation and making things predictable. And finally, the theory of constraints, or TOC, which has this laser-like focus on one thing: increasing throughput. Basically, the speed at which you make money. On the surface, yeah, they look like they're pulling in totally different directions. And that's exactly how companies have treated them for years, as this either-or choice. But here's the big idea we're digging into today. What if that whole conflict is just a big misunderstanding? What if they're not rivals at all? What if they're actually specialists on the same team, and when you put them together, you get these incredible breakthrough results? And that's exactly where this idea of a unified framework comes into play. It's about combining all three into something called TLS. You guessed it, theory of constraints, Lean, and Six Sigma. You know, it's funny, the guy who invented TOC, Eli Goldratt, he pretty much saw this coming. He basically said that after a while, all these great new ideas have to start coming together, they have to be molded into one body of knowledge. So this isn't about inventing something totally new out of thin air. It's just about realizing how the pieces were always meant to fit together. It's just a natural evolution of thinking. And I love this analogy. It just makes so much sense. Think of it like a symphony orchestra. TOC, that's your conductor. The conductor points to one section and says, this is where we need to focus. This is the part of the system that's holding us back. Then Lean comes in. Lean is like the editor, removing all the unnecessary, wasteful notes from the score. And finally, Six Sigma. Well, Six Sigma is your virtuoso musician, making sure that every single note that's left is played absolutely perfectly every single time. Okay, so to actually make this happen in the real world, it takes a shift in three really big areas. First, you need a totally new mindset. Second, you need to measure success in a way that the whole company agrees on. And third, you need a single integrated methodology that brings it all together. Now, look, this isn't always easy, right? It means breaking down some old habits. But let's see how one company actually pulled it off. So let's go inside a real company. It's a manufacturing firm in India. We're going to call it the DC company to protect their identity. And trust me, they were facing some major challenges. Yeah, the situation was getting pretty dire. They had this huge spike in defects with their castings, which meant their rework costs were just going through the roof. But the real kicker? They couldn't keep up with customer demand. They were falling short by more than 23,000 units every single year. Just think about that. That's a massive amount of lost money and a whole lot of unhappy customers. So what they do? Well, instead of panicking and trying to fix everything everywhere all at once, they pulled out the core playbook from the theory of constraints, the 5 focusing steps. This is where TOC, our conductor, steps up to the podium. Step 1, you got to identify the system's constraint. So they did a quick analysis of their whole process, and bam. One operation, die casting, was taking 96 seconds per part. That was way, way longer than any other step. That was it. That was the bottleneck. The entire factory, the whole system, could not move one bit faster than that one single machine. But here's where it gets cool. They didn't just stop there. They brought in a classic Six Sigma tool, a Pareto chart, to dig deeper into the problems at that bottleneck. And guess what they found? A whopping 67% of all their quality problems were these internal defects, things like tiny air bubbles. And they were all coming from that one machine. Suddenly, they knew exactly what problem to attack. All right, on to step 2. Decide how to exploit that constraint. This is where you squeeze every drop of performance out of it. And this is why that focus is so critical. The team actually did the math.
Every single minute that die casting machine was down or making a bad part wasn't just a lost minute. It was costing the entire company $7.81 in lost sales. That number, that changes everything. It tells you exactly where to put your energy. And this is where the Lean and Six Sigma musicians finally get to play their solos. They unleash this whole battery of targeted tools right at that one spot. They used design of experiments to dial in the perfect machine settings. They brought in TPM and 5S to slash downtime and get organized. They used mistake proofing to make it harder to create a defect in the first place. All of it just aimed like a laser at that one critical machine. Step 3 is subordinate. And really, this is just common sense. If you've just worked super hard to get a good part through your bottleneck, the absolute last thing you want is for something to mess it up later on down the line. So they made sure all the other processes were geared to support the bottleneck. They protected that valuable output they had just fought for. So after they squeezed every last bit of performance out of their existing system, they hit step 4, elevate. They still couldn't meet all their customer demand, so they had a choice. They could make a big strategic investment and buy a new machine for $40,000. Or they could do something more tactical. Find a local shop to make the extra parts they needed for about $1 a pop. That gave them a ton of flexibility without having to make a huge upfront investment. So after all this focused, targeted work, what were the results? Well, first, the cycle time at that bottleneck, it dropped by 4.1%. Now, 4.1% might not sound like a lot, but what did it translate to? A massive increase in output. They were now producing an extra 16,341 units every single year. And here's the number that really matters, the bottom line. That extra production meant an annual increase in throughput. We're talking actual cash flowing into the company of over $226,000. That right there is the power of this integrated, focused approach. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. This isn't just a story about one manufacturing company. It's about a universal principle that was at work here. And it all boils down to one word: focus. Because the big lesson here, the real takeaway, is that this team didn't just work harder on everything. No, they worked smarter. They applied the right tools to the right place at the right time. They found that one single thing that was holding the entire system back, and they threw all their energy and intelligence right there. And that really leaves us with a final question. Because this isn't just about factories and machines. This is a powerful way of thinking you can apply to, well, to anything. So the question I want to leave you with is this. In your work, in your projects, maybe even in your own life, what's the one single constraint that's holding you back from getting what you want?